The African savannah holds secrets that would break the hearts of those who dare to listen. In the golden grasslands of the Serengeti, where the sun burns relentlessly and the wind carries whispers of ancient battles, one story stands above all others as a testament to loyalty, loss, and the lengths to which a king will go for vengeance. This is not a tale of simple survival or territorial disputes. This is the chronicle of Mfalme, a lion whose name would echo through the acacia trees long after his final roar faded into silence. Born beneath the crimson dawn of 2019, Mfalme emerged into a world where strength determined fate and blood sealed destinies. His pride, the Timba lions, ruled over 30 square kilometers of prime hunting grounds along the Mara River. 12 lionesses formed the backbone of this empire, their amber eyes reflecting the wisdom of generations who had defended these lands. 23 cubs played in the shadows of their protection, their tiny paws leaving prints in soil that had been claimed by tooth and claw. At the heart of this kingdom stood Mfalme and his coalition partner Django, two brothers whose bond had been forged in the fires of exile and tempered by countless battles. The pride flourished under their reign. Herds of wildebeest thundered across their territory during the Great Migration, providing abundance that filled every belly and strengthened every sinew. Zebra grazed nervously at the borders, always aware that death prowled in the tall grass. Buffalo wallowed in the mud holes, their massive frames a testament to the rich ecosystem that thrived under the lion's dominance. The Timba Pride had achieved what every coalition dreams of: a perfect balance of power, protection, and prosperity. Mfalme himself was a sight to behold. His mane, dark as midnight and thick as storm clouds, framed a face that spoke of unwavering determination. At 420 pounds of pure muscle, he moved across the grasslands like a living monument to feline perfection. His roar could be heard for miles, a declaration that resonated through the bones of every creature within his domain. But it was not just his physical presence that commanded respect. Mfalme possessed an intelligence that set him apart from other males, a calculating mind that could read the subtle signs of approaching danger and respond with surgical precision. Django complemented his brother perfectly. Where Mfalme was the strategic mind, Django was the relentless enforcer. Scars crisscrossed his golden hide like medals of honor, each mark telling the story of a battle won and territory defended. His loyalty to Mfalme was absolute, a bond that had carried them through the darkest days of their youth when they wandered the wilderness as exiles, learning the harsh lessons that only the savannah could teach. Together, they had built an empire that seemed unshakable. The lionesses hunted with deadly efficiency, their coordinated attacks bringing down prey that lesser prides could never dream of challenging. The cubs grew strong and fearless, learning the ancient ways of the hunt under the watchful eyes of their mothers and the protective presence of their fathers. Neighboring coalitions gave the Timba territory a wide berth, knowing that any challenge would be met with overwhelming force. But in the world of lions, peace is always temporary, and prosperity attracts the hungry eyes of those who have nothing to lose. Beyond the horizon, where the grasslands met the rocky outcrops of the northern territories, a coalition of 4 males had been watching. The Kifaru brothers, named for their rhino-like stubbornness and brutal efficiency, had been plotting for months. Led by Haysira, a battle-scarred veteran with eyes like burning coals, they had grown tired of scraping by on the fringes of other prides' territories. Haysira had lost his own pride 2 years earlier to a coalition of 6 males from the eastern plains. The memory of that defeat burned in his chest like a festering wound, driving him to seek not just new territory, but the complete domination that had been stolen from him. His brothers, Juri, Mapinduzi, and the youngest, Mwanga, followed his lead with a desperation of males who had tasted power and found themselves starving for its return. The first signs of trouble came in the form of distant roars that carried on the evening wind. Mfalme's ears would twitch as he recognized the voices of strangers testing the boundaries of his kingdom. Territorial markings appeared closer and closer to the heart of Timba lands, the scent signatures of males who no longer feared the consequences of their boldness. The lionesses grew restless, their hunting patterns shifting as they sensed the approaching storm. 1. For 3 weeks, the Kafaru brothers probed the defenses of the Timba Pride. They appeared at waterholes just after sunset, their eyes gleaming in the twilight as they studied the movements of their intended victims. They followed hunting parties from a distance, learning the routines and weaknesses of the pride's daily life. Most ominously, they began calling to the younger lionesses, their roars carrying promises of new leadership and different futures. Mfalme and Django responded as any dominant males would. They increased their patrols, marking territory with renewed aggression and answering every challenge with roars that shook the earth. They positioned themselves between the intruders and their pride, making it clear that any approach would be met with violence. But 4 against 2 created odds that even the most powerful coalition could not ignore forever. The confrontation that would change everything began on a morning when the sun rose blood red through the dust clouds kicked up by migrating herds. The Kafaru brothers had chosen their moment perfectly, striking when Django was recovering from injuries sustained in a hunt gone wrong, and Mfalme was forced to defend a territory that stretched beyond the limits of any single lion's endurance. The battle erupted near the ancient baobab tree that had served as the pride's gathering place for generations. Its massive trunk, scarred by the claws of countless lions, would bear witness to violence that surpassed anything in its 1,000-year memory. 4 roars split the morning air, a challenge that could not be ignored and would not be forgiven. Mfalme answered with a sound that seemed to rise from the very core of the earth, a declaration that the Timba lands would not fall without a fight that would be remembered long after the bones of the fallen had turned to dust. The clash that followed lasted from sunrise until the shadows grew long with approaching dusk. Dust clouds rose like pillars of smoke, marking the spots where titans collided with the fury of thunderstorms made flesh. Blood stained the ancient soil as claws found their marks and teeth closed on throats that refused to yield. The lionesses could only watch in horror as their world began to crumble, their protectors fighting a war that numbers had already decided. When the dust finally settled and silence reclaimed the bloody ground, the ancient baobab stood witness to a transformed world. Django lay motionless beneath its gnarled roots, His golden coat darkened with crimson, his fierce eyes closed forever. The scars that had told the story of his victories now served as the final chapter of a life spent in unwavering loyalty. Mfalme stood over his fallen brother, his own body torn and bleeding, but his spirit shattered beyond any physical wound. The Kifaru brothers circled like vultures, their victory incomplete but undeniable. Hasira's eyes burned with savage satisfaction as he surveyed the broken defender of the Timba lands. The other three males, bloodied but triumphant, began the grim work that follows every successful takeover. The sound that pierced the evening air next would haunt the grasslands for months to come. Not the roar of conquest, but the desperate screams of lionesses defending cubs that had become targets in the new order. What followed was a massacre that violated every law of nature's balance. The Kifaru brothers moved through the Pride with methodical brutality, hunting down every cub that carried the bloodline of their defeated enemies. 23 young lives, each representing hope for the future, were snuffed out in a single night of horror. The Lioneses fought with the desperation of mothers watching their world burn. But 4 against 12 was a battle they could never win. Mfalme, wounded and outnumbered, faced the most agonizing decision any king could confront: stay and die defending cubs already lost, or retreat to fight another day. As Hasira's roar echoed across the killing ground, proclaiming his dominion over lands soaked in innocent blood, Mfalme made his choice. With wounds that would leave permanent scars and a heart that felt permanently broken, he vanished into the darkness beyond the baobab tree. The great king of the Timba Pride had become a ghost, haunting the edges of his former kingdom. For 3 days he neither ate nor slept, driven forward only by the memory of tiny bodies scattered like broken flowers beneath the ancient tree. The lionesses who had survived the takeover looked through him as if he were already dead, their eyes reflecting the harsh truth that in the world of lions, failure meant abandonment. In those first terrible weeks of exile, death stalked Mfalme like a patient hunter. Hyena clans that had once cowered at his approach now grew bold, sensing weakness in the solitary figure that wandered the borderlands. Rival males tested his resolve with threatening displays, probing for signs that the former king had lost his will to fight. Hunger gnawed at his belly as hunting alone proved far more difficult than the coordinated kills he had once led. But something burned within Mfalme that refused to be extinguished. As his body grew lean and his mane became matted with dust and blood, his mind sharpened into a weapon more dangerous than any claw. He began to study his enemies with the patience of a crocodile waiting for prey to drink. Every movement of the Kifaru brothers was catalogued, every weakness noted, every pattern memorized. The transformation from king to hunter took months of careful observation. Mfalme learned that Hasira favored the eastern watering holes at dawn. When the light was still dim, an ambush was possible. He discovered that Juri often separated from his brothers to patrol the southern borders, confident in his own strength, but vulnerable to sudden attack. Mapinduzi had grown comfortable in his new territory, patrolling with the lazy confidence of a male who believed his victory was permanent. Most importantly, Mfalme identified Mwanga as the weak link in the coalition. The youngest of the Kifaru brothers had never truly committed to the brutal methods that had won them their throne. His reluctance to participate in the slaughter of cubs had not gone unnoticed by his brothers, creating fractures in their unity that a patient enemy might exploit. As the dry season approached and water sources dwindled, Mfalme put his observations to deadly use. The first strike came at dawn, near the Mte Moku watering hole, where Juri had come to drink alone. The attack was swift, precise, and absolutely merciless. When Juri's brothers found his body hours later, they discovered wounds that spoke of surgical violence rather than random fury. This was not the desperate assault of a broken exile, but the calculated execution of a predator who had learned to kill with purpose. The psychological warfare had begun. Hasira's roars of rage echoed across the territory as he called for his missing brother, but only silence answered. The remaining 3 Kifaru males tightened their formation, no longer allowing separation that might leave them vulnerable to an enemy who had apparently learned to strike from the shadows. Mfalme's second attack came 3 weeks later, targeting Mapinduzi as he investigated scent markings near the border of the old Timba territory. This time, witnesses existed. A herd of zebras scattered in terror as they watched a living nightmare emerge from the tall grass. The Exile had become something more than a lion, a force of nature driven by purpose that transcended ordinary survival instincts. The wounds inflicted on Mapinduzi were not immediately fatal, but they served a different purpose. As the injured male limped back to his coalition, every step spread the message that their enemy was not merely alive, but thriving in his hatred. The scars would heal, but the fear they represented would fester like poison in the minds of the remaining Kifaru brothers. Terror began to reshape the daily rhythms of the pride that had once belonged to Mfalme. Hunting parties moved in tight formation, afraid to spread out in case the ghost of the former king struck again. Lionesses whispered among themselves about the strange new dynamic, where their supposed protectors jumped at shadows and roared challenges at empty grassland. Hasira's paranoia intensified with each passing day. He saw threats in every movement of the grass, heard danger in every call of the wind. The confident leader who had orchestrated the downfall of the Timba Pride found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, unable to enjoy the fruits of victory while an invisible enemy plotted his destruction. The third strike proved that Mfalme's patience was matched only by his growing tactical brilliance. Instead of attacking another coalition member directly, he targeted their food supply. A freshly killed buffalo, brought down by the combined efforts of all 3 remaining brothers, was found the next morning stripped bare and marked with the scent of their tormentor. The message was clear: nowhere was safe, nothing was sacred, and the hunt for vengeance had only just begun. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it the harsh winds that stripped leaves from the acacia trees and scattered them like the broken dreams of the Kifaru brothers. The psychological assault had achieved what brute force could not. Hasira, once the undisputed architect of conquest, now found himself ruling over a kingdom built on shifting sand. His remaining brothers, Mapinduzi and Mwanga, moved with the nervous energy of prey animals, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of the predator who had transformed their victory into a living nightmare. Mfalme had learned that revenge was not a single moment of violence, but a slow poison that seeped into every aspect of his enemy's existence. From his hidden refugees in the rocky outcrops beyond the former Timba territory, he watched the gradual dissolution of the coalition that had destroyed everything he loved. The bonds between the surviving brothers grew brittle under the constant pressure of fear, each male beginning to question whether their unity was worth the target it painted on their backs. The fourth month of the campaign brought an opportunity that Mfalme had been cultivating with the patience of a spider weaving its web. Mwanga, the youngest and most conflicted of the Kifaru brothers, had begun making secret journeys to the edges of their territory. His guilt over the massacre of cubs had never fully healed, and the constant threat of retribution had opened wounds in his conscience that festered with each passing day. On a night when the moon hung like a silver coin against the velvet darkness, Mfalme finally revealed himself to his youngest enemy. The confrontation took place near a dried riverbed where the bones of ancient floods lay bleached white in the starlight. But instead of violence, the Exile offered something far more dangerous: the truth about what their victory had truly cost. The conversation that followed would haunt Mwanga for the rest of his shortened life. Mfalme spoke not with the rage of a warrior seeking blood, but with the quiet certainty of a judge pronouncing sentence. He described the screams of cubs that had echoed through the night of the takeover, the way their tiny bodies had been scattered like broken toys beneath the baobab tree. He painted pictures with words that burned themselves into Mwanga's memory, ensuring that sleep would never again come easily to the youngest killer. When dawn broke over the riverbed, two figures walked away in opposite directions. Mwanga returned to his brothers a changed lion, his eyes haunted by visions that no amount of territory or pride could erase. Mfalme melted back into the shadows, satisfied that he had planted seeds of destruction that would grow without further cultivation. The psychological fractures within the Kifaru coalition widened with alarming speed. Mwanga's behavior became erratic, his responses to danger delayed by the weight of his conscience. Mapinduzi, still bearing the scars from his encounter with the Exile, jumped at sounds that existed only in his imagination. Even Hasira, the iron-willed leader who had orchestrated their rise to power, found his judgment clouded by paranoia that saw enemies in every shadow. The lionesses of the former Timba Pride watched these developments with the calculating eyes of survivors who understood that power was shifting once again. Some began to remember the stability and protection they had enjoyed under Mfalme's rule, comparing it unfavorably to the nervous tension that now characterized their daily existence. Whispers spread through the pride like wildfire, carrying dangerous questions about whether their current protectors were truly stronger than the ghosts that haunted their borders. Mfalme's fifth strike came not through violence, but through a demonstration of the power he still commanded over the natural world. A massive buffalo bull, one of the most dangerous prey animals in all of Africa, was found dead at the heart of Kifaru territory. The kill bore all the signs of a single lion's work, an impossible feat that spoke of strength and skill that transcended normal limitations. The carcass was positioned deliberately, a monument to capability that mocked the coalition's growing weakness. The message was unmistakable. While they cowered in fear of shadows, their enemy had grown stronger. The exile, who should have been weakened by months of solitary survival, had instead become something more formidable than any of them could match individually. The mathematics of their situation began to shift in ways that made even Hasira question whether their numerical advantage was sufficient to guarantee survival. Terror took root in the hearts of the Kafaru brothers, spreading like a disease that ate away at their confidence and unity. Hunting became a paranoid exercise in constant vigilance, with each male watching not just for prey, but for signs of the predator who stalked them with inhuman patience. The Pride's cubs, born after the takeover, sensed the tension and grew skittish, their play subdued by the atmosphere of dread that permeated their world. As the dry season reached its peak and water sources dwindled to precious few, Mfalme prepared for the next phase of his campaign. The psychological warfare had achieved its purpose, weakening the bonds between his enemies and filling their minds with doubt. But the exile understood that fear alone would not restore his lost pride or bring justice for the cubs who had died beneath a baobab tree. The time for direct confrontation was approaching, and when it came, the lessons learned through months of careful observation would determine whether vengeance would finally be served. The ancient rhythms of the savannah continued their eternal dance, but now they moved to a different drummer. Where once the Timba territory had echoed with the confident roars of established kings, now it trembled with the uncertainty of rulers who had discovered that victory was not the same as security. The ghost of Mfalme had become more than memory. He had become inevitability, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or escaped. In the rocky refuges where he planned his next moves, the exile sharpened his claws against stone and felt the weight of destiny settling around his shoulders like a mantle of stars. 14 months had passed since that terrible night beneath the baobab tree, and every day had been spent in preparation for the reckoning that was now at hand. The hunt for vengeance was approaching its climax, and when the final battle came, it would determine not just the fate of the Kafaru brothers, but the future of a bloodline that refused to be extinguished. The savannah held its breath, waiting for the storm that would reshape the balance of power once more. In the distance, hyenas laughed their mocking calls. Vultures circled on thermals that carried the scent of approaching violence, and the wind whispered secrets that only the dead could fully understand. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the grasslands long after the last roar had faded into silence. Thus ends the chronicle of Mfalme, the lion whose 14-month quest transformed him from king to exile to legend. In the unforgiving theater of the African savannah, where mercy is a luxury that only the dead can afford, his story reminds us that some bonds transcend the boundaries of life and death. The roars that once echoed with pride and protection became whispers of vengeance that haunted his enemies until their final breath. The baobab tree still stands sentinel over the grasslands, its ancient bark bearing the scars of that terrible night when innocents died beneath its branches. Rangers who patrol these lands speak in hushed tones of the ghost lion who taught the Kafaru brothers that victory without honor carries the seeds of its own destruction. The lionesses remember the cubs who survived carry his bloodline, and the wind still carries echoes of a roar that refused to be silenced. Mfalme's tale is more than one lion's quest for justice. It is a testament to the lengths that love will travel, the price that betrayal demands, and the truth that in the wild heart of Africa, some debts can only be paid in blood. His legend lives on, carved into the very soul of the Serengeti, a reminder that even in death, a true king's influence endures. The savannah remembers its own, and some stories, once written in dust and tears, become eternal as the stars that watch over the endless grasslands where lions still roam free.